Nationals leader David Littleproud is reportedly facing an internal revolt after failing to lock in any of the almost $30 billion worth of funding commitments agreed to by Scott Morrison and Barnaby Joyce in return for the country party's backing of a net zero emissions by 2050 target. David Littleproud joins me now live. Thank you for your time. So how many of these funding commitments have you secured?
Well, let me make this clear. I don't comment on those forums that are confidential. It's disrespectful to those members of those forums to actually publicly canvass the conversations. Secondly, let me make it clear, we're in opposition, not in government. So at the moment, we still have two further budgets of this government to go through. There'll be conversations about where we move forward as a coalition, but what I've done as leader has been the first leader to set a clear pathway for a long-held view around our pathway for net zero, which is around the new emerging technology of small-scale modular nuclear, which is zero emissions. That's the pathway that I took as soon as I became leader. I was the first one to actually write to the Prime Minister, to ask for a national energy forum, to actually put it on the table, to have that conversation. And proudly, I was able to help Peter Dutton get his team. Peter Dutton took the courageous step to get the Liberals across the line. Many people said, why haven't we done nuclear before? We were in government for 9 years. There were elements within the Liberal Party that needed to get comfort with it. Peter took my hand after we showed leadership as the Nationals of setting a pathway for a nuclear conversation, that he took my hand and he took his Liberal Party with him. And I think that's the leadership that Peter Dutton and I have shown since we've been elected as leaders of our two party. And that's what we'll continue to do, to make sure we use common sense on what's a very complex issue about making sure we have affordable, reliable energy that reduces emissions. And we think that conversation should have started, and we've shown the political leadership to start it, and that's what I'm very proud of.
But are you facing an internal revolt from members of your own party on this?
No, what journalists need to appreciate is the culture of the National Party is a little different to many other parties. There's no captain's call in any of this. It's the primacy of the party room. We get to determination when all the facts are put to the party room, and we make a determination in the majority, and that's how we operate. So there's no revolt, because ultimately what will happen is all our policies go back to our party room. That's the process that we go through. The primacy of the party room is something that I respect as the Nationals leader. That's the way I've led our party and why we've had such great success in not just nuclear, but I was also able to put in place a structured process around the voice of making sure that we were able to enunciate our reasoning behind it by having a subcommittee before we made our announcement, listening to yes and no, and working through it with the party room. And that is the beauty of the National Party. That draws on the diversity and skill set that we have in our party room. That meant that we have led, not just on nuclear, but we've led on the voice, because we've drawn on that, and I've created environments. That's my job as a leader, not to make captain's call. It's not about me, it's about the Nationals and the common sense that we take to Canberra and how that influences national policy. And I think the Nationals have been outstanding in the policy settings that we put in place over the last 14 months.
All right, let's move on now. The National AntiCorruption Commission, of course, opens its doors today. Will the Nationals be making any referrals?
Oh, well, none that I have any sight of at the moment. Obviously, we're not about weaponising this. And I think that's the danger that we always felt this body could become. It shouldn't be used as a political weapon. And I think what we need to do is to create an environment for the Commission to be able to cogently work through any referrals that are put to them in an environment where the politicisation and the publicisation of them are taken away. And that, I think, is the responsibility of political leadership of all sides. And I hope that all the other political parties understand that, and we use this for what its true intention is, rather than the politicisation of tearing down people's character. And the Nationals will only use this in any event that we see any concern that we may have about corruption. So there's nothing that we see on the horizon from a Nationals perspective, but if it arises, we'll use the proper vehicles that are available to us. But I don't intend to use this as a political weapon. The Nationals want to rise above that. I think the Australian people are sick of that. They want us to get outcomes for them, and that's what we're committed to, and that's what we've been doing for 14 months, holding the government to account, but putting forward cogent policy while we've been doing it.
How do you prevent, though, the politicisation of it? I mean, the Greens have already come out. They are referring PwC. There's calls as well for Stuart Roberts to be referred as well. Has it already ramped up before it's even begun?
Yeah, and that's a reflection on those that want to politicise it. I think you'll find that the resourcing of this body is adequate enough to be able to, in their own course of function, see what's happening in society and happening in the public discourse, to actually undertake and initiate investigations themselves on their own volition. I don't think they're going to have to be sitting back and waiting for us. I think that belittles their ability. So, this is where I think it's a reflection on those that are starting to weaponise this. We don't intend to do that unless we see something that is grievous in terms of corruption. The Nationals don't intend to use it at all. We intend to get on with the job, and that's what the Australian people want. And I think that's where someone has to show the leadership of it, and I think the Nationals intend to do that, as we've shown over the last 14 months. If others don't, well, that's a reflection on them.
All right, let's talk about The Voice now. BHP, Rio Tinto and Wesfarmers, they are pouring millions of dollars into the Yes campaign. What do you make of these large corporate donations?
Well, this is about buying social licence, and I don't think our country's moral compass should be set by corporate Australia, particularly some of those that hardly have an impeccable record dealing not only with Indigenous Australians, but dealing with Australians. So, look, everyone's entitled to their view. My job as a political leader is to create the environment where the information gets through, that they understand the risks that the government is posing to this, that it's not just about constitutional recognition. Unfortunately, the Prime Minister has conflated it with a bureaucracy, another bureaucracy. If it had just been about constitutional recognition, it would have been a unifying moment. Instead, all the Prime Minister's done is divided our nation by repeating the mistakes of the past. And that's why the Nationals came out 8 months ago when we couldn't support this, because we've had a representative body before. It was called ATSIC, and we live with those consequences here in rural and remote Australia. And to repeat that mistake and then enshrining it, and without taking the Australian people into their trust about even telling them how it's going to work when there's legal risks, by putting the legislation in Parliament, so not just politicians can see, but the Australian people can see, so as the Prime Minister doesn't trust the Australian people. So why would they trust him? This is a big change, and if corporate Australia wants to hang their hat on it, well and good, but I'm sure there's a few shareholders a little disappointed about millions of dollars coming out of companies getting involved in a national debate that should be a very personal decision for each Australian, not for corporates to buy social licence and try and set the moral compass of this country. Even
in New South Wales, at least 10 councils have voted to back the Yes vote and are pumping thousands of dollars into a national campaign. Should ratepayers' money be used on pushing an agenda?
Well, the beauty of our democracy is those ratepayers will get to make that determination when they're up for election, and that should be the case. I think it's important that this referendum is held with all the information, both yes and no, but it's done in an environment where people can make that choice with all the information. And if those that want to participate, well and good. But if they're organisations and corporates that have accountable measures to them, then there is an accountability mechanism that those people that sign up and are members or electors will actually get to have that say when they come up for election. And that's the beauty of living in this democracy.
David Littleproud, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.